Welcome. My name's Sherry Forsyth and I'm a bereavement coach as well as a peak performance coach. And today my topic is men and grief. My feeling is that men are very handicapped by Western society because of the expectations we place on how we feel a man should grieve. It discourages any kind of emotionality in men and in fact encourages them and praises them for being strong and silent and stoic and self-contained and very resilient. Men are also conditioned to the whole idea of that big boys don't cry, and when they're little boys, should they want to cry, that's been conditioned out of them. If they should find themselves showing emotion or in fact being tearful, they often are teased, they are found to be weak, or other boys would say you are being weak. And so there's nothing that is encouraging our men, in fact, to show any emotion at all. But this doesn't mean that our men are unfeeling or that they're not battling with grief. Men often get overlooked because they are not visibly grieving. So they get a double whammy. First of all, society makes them be stoic and not speak about their emotions, which is a problem. And then because they are actually doing that, they get overlooked as well. So I'm hoping that this video today will help partners, children, wives, husbands understand about men, maybe a little bit more about men and grieving. Research has shown that men and women grieve differently. So we have different ways of doing it and different expectations and different things that work for us. As well as remember that no one grieves the same. Everyone's journey is different, and there definitely is no right or wrong way to grieve. It's a very personal journey. So what I am speaking about are a few general commonalities of men and grieving. So this is generally how men grieve because of society's expectations. Firstly, there's silence. Men don't talk. They keep their feelings to themselves. They're secretive. So in other words, if they do feel really sad, they will mourn in private. They won't let anyone see that. And that is a direct result of possibly the teasing and bullying they got when they were young and they were told that big boys don't cry. So this makes it even more isolating for men because they can't share that deep emotion. Men also have to be strong, so they can't show emotion. Men feel the need to be in control, and so very often you'll find that because men are frightened of the fact that they aren't able to control the situation where the person has died, or they can't control their emotion, they will find something that they can control. It could be exercise, it could be work, it could be diet, but it's something that they can control to within an inch of its life. Okay. Men also are supposed to be fearless. So what is a man supposed to do when he actually is quite terrified of maybe the power of his emotions, but he's got to come across as being completely without fear? And this leads to men having to put on lots of masks to show that they are actually living up to society's expectations of what they're wanting. Men like to be very cognitive and rational in their approach. So in other words, let's not feel, let's think about it logically and let's come to some kind of solution. I do apologize for the dog in the background. There's nothing I can do about that. Okay, men need a physical expression of their grief. Okay, so they usually do active things as a way of getting through their grief. One father who had lost his daughter went into his workshop and started sawing planks, sawing them and sanding them and making them beautiful. He never made anything with the planks, but in fact using the sawing, he used the sawing as a way to get to connect with his emotion and to be able to maybe work through it, because he was doing a very mundane, repetitive kind of a thing. Men also feel that because they're logical and rational, I need to confront my pain, I need to sort it, and I need to move it on. And that must happen very, very quickly. Not realizing actually that grief is a process, and that we will always miss that person to a greater or lesser extent. Grief also oscillates between positive and negative emotions. And this can often be very frustrating for men because they can't understand that. Men also feel very responsible to take care of their families. And if particularly a member of the family has died, men can often feel quite guilty because they didn't protect or care for that member of the family enough. They didn't care for them properly. And that guilt can often be a very detrimental emotion for the men to have on top of their grief. Men can also know what they want to say, but the words actually get stuck in their throat. It's almost like there's a blockage there between what they're wanting to say and their lips saying the words. My husband Mark found that absolutely to be true, and Carol Staudaker in her book, excellent book, Men and Grief, also refers to it. So you might be suffering from the same thing. Very often a man's pain, because he can't communicate it or feel it, allow himself to feel it, that pain gets converted into rage or anger. Anger is a defense mechanism which allows us to deflect our pain. So, in other words, men can use anger to kind of drug their pain away. According to Terence Real, he talks about a thing called, in addition to rage and anger, a thing called covert depression, where there are no other real symptoms of depression, but there's a lot of irritation and frustration and anger, and it's actually because they are suffering from depression but can't exhibit the real cause of their emotions. I'm going to put a link to my husband's the interview I did with my husband, so that you can have a listen to his journey, where there was a lot of displaced emotion, a lot of anger, a lot of rage, a lot of volatility, and kind of irrational thinking. So feel free to go and have a look at that video as well. It discusses his journey in a lot more detail. Okay, men also feel as if part of their body has been dismembered. That is how much they are missing the person. So it's a physical manifestation of their emotions. Men often also stay very, very busy during that time. It's a way of distracting yourself, and if you are doing something, like for example, my husband Mike was on the emails, letting everybody know every step of the way how it was progressing with our daughter, and that was a way of doing and being rather than just feeling, and that's a very masculine way to deal with grief. So they need to be very active, and that is why men will often throw themselves back into work maybe way before they should, but it's because they'll be doing something. Sadly, some men also deal with their grief by becoming addicted, because it's one way of numbing the vast emotion that they're feeling. So all of these above things that I've mentioned can lead or do lead to a man suppressing his emotions and all the consequences that come with that. So there are many consequences, but amongst them would be possible illness, or it could lead to their grief becoming dysfunctional, and I'll chat about that in a few minutes. So are there any other ways that you experienced grief or your partner experienced grief that you would like to add, that we can add to this list. So please feel free to write it in the comment below. So now we're going to talk about what men do need. Okay? Bearing in mind that grief is not the same for everyone, so some of these things will really ring true with you and other things won't. So please just take what you feel will be valuable. So men need other men to talk with, possibly men who've shared the same experience, or alternatively just a really good friend who has the ability to be empathetic and compassionate. Men need to be heard, okay, when they want to talk, and they probably won't want to talk very much. They also want you as their partner to be their safe place, so that they know that whatever they are going to be saying or talking about or doing or how they're misbehaving, you will love them unconditionally. Also, men like to withdraw. We've heard that expression, withdrawing into their man cave, and that is the way that they like to deal with and process their emotions. So as long as that withdrawal doesn't carry on for an excessive period of time, it's all a natural and normal part of men and grieving. So as your partner, as a partner of a grieving man, you can possibly help them to find activities so that they are doing rather than being. Okay, help them to find activities, maybe encourage hobbies that they might already have, or even new hobbies that will start as a result of the loss. Men also because they have a rational way of approaching things, they like to be actively problem solving. So if there's something that you don't know how to do, you're not sure what the next step is, put them onto the computer, let them research it and let them find out. That also will help them in feeling that they are able to contribute to this whole, the whole process of grieving. Men need independence, quiet, and solitude. Once again, not excessively, but that's the way they process, whereas as women, we often process by speaking it through with a friend. I think a really good thing is not to ask a man how he feels, but rather ask him, what would you like to do? Because that again is an active thing, and men are much better with action than with speaking. And the last thing is for us to be able to let go of the expectations that society has placed on men and just see them as a person who is grieving just like we are. Okay, is there anything else that has helped you or your partner in coming to terms with your grieving process, in making it a little bit easier? If so, please put it in the comments box. I would really welcome that. And lastly, I want to just speak very briefly about the huge topic of dysfunctional or complicated grief. So because men don't speak about their emotions, how on earth are we supposed to know if they're really battling? Because they're not able to tell us that. So here's a list of things to watch out for. Okay, chronic depression, chronic withdrawal, and low self-esteem. Okay, a deterioration of relationships with friends and family, whereas normally it was going along quite well. Suddenly there's conflict or there's indifference. A really good sign is any kind of extreme new behavior. Extremes across the board, they can eat too much or too little, exercise too much or too little, work too hard or not at all. So it might be a normal part of their everyday life, but suddenly they're doing it in extremes. And I think that is one of the most valuable signs that something is going wrong in their emotional life. They can also have chronic physical complaints, headaches, backaches, fatigues. All of those are normal in the initial stages of grief, but it's if they extend for a much longer period of time. there can also be chronic anxiety, agitation, restlessness that you will very easily be able to pick up in your partner. Extreme volatility is another one, especially if your husband normally is not a volatile person. As mentioned before, there can be addiction, any kind of chemical and substance abuse that is a way of numbing the pain that our men don't know how to deal with. I've mentioned before, indifference to others. My husband coined the phrase sympathy fatigue. In other words, I'm too tired of being able to give and give and give to people, so therefore that results in being quite indifferent to the emotionality of other people. There could be insensitivity, working too much, workaholism. And I think another really important thing to look at is if his behavior in any way is harmful to himself and or others, then I would see it as a bit of a red flag. And so if you are worried about the fact that maybe your partner is entering into dysfunctional or complicated grief, please seek professional help so that they will help, the professionals will help them be able to work through and maybe stop the complicated grief from getting too bad. So in conclusion, just to remember, there is no quick fix for grieving. The only way through grief is through it. The best thing is to be able to honor each other in your respective journeys, in the different ways between men and women that we grieve, and at all times to make sure that your relationship is characterized by respect, by compassion, and in love. And with those words, I thank you as always for watching this video, and if you think it might be of help to somebody else, I ask you to please share it. Thank you so much.